I started to suspect my husband when he began spending more time at home, so I decided to install a hidden camera in our home. A few days later, I discovered my husband intimately involved with my own sister, but the worst was when my malicious mother revealed to me that Alicia held her coffee cup with both hands, the familiar and comforting warmth between her fingers offering her a small reprieve amidst her routine morning. The clock on her desk read 11:11. In just over 2 hours, she would finish another workday at the marketing office where she had been promoted just a year ago. The promotion hadn't been easy, nor had it been simple to balance work and marriage. However, Alicia felt fortunate, or at least she thought she did. While checking her email, she received a text message from Laura, her younger sister and closest friend. Since they were little, Laura had been the light of her life, a special bond that Alicia shared with no one else. Laura often visited her home almost daily while Alicia worked, and the idea of her sister watching over her husband while she was away felt comforting and natural. Alicia smiled as she read the message, which was simple and familiar. "I left some pastries at home for you too. I made them this morning. Tell Daniel not to eat them all." Alicia replied with a thankful message and returned to work, immersed in her routine with the thought of going home, finding Daniel working in his office in the small studio downstairs, and enjoying a quiet evening with her husband. But something unsettled her when she opened the door upon arriving home. It was dark, with only a small flickering light coming from Daniel's studio, and the rest of the house felt strangely silent, almost cold. Did Laura leave so quickly? She wondered. She walked slowly, leaving her bag in the foyer. The studio door was slightly ajar, and she caught a glimpse of Daniel's reflection on the monitor screen, motionless and engrossed in something unusual. "Daniel, everything okay?" Alicia tried to sound casual. He turned around, but his response was rushed, his voice somewhat tense. "Oh, yes, sure, all good. I was just finishing something for work. I didn't know you'd be home this early." "It's 3, Daniel. I didn't get home early. Actually, I thought Laura was here because she wrote to me saying she left pastries. Didn't you see her?" Daniel took a few extra seconds to respond, as if carefully choosing each word. "Yes, Laura came by. She left the pastries in the kitchen. We had a quick coffee, and then she left. I think she was in a hurry." Daniel's response felt strange, and although Alicia didn't know exactly why, something didn't add up. Suddenly, she recalled the times Laura mentioned how charming Daniel was and that they got along well. She also remembered thinking her husband was lucky to have a sister-in-law who admired and supported him so much. She tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, but something in her mind urged her to go to the kitchen. There, she found the plate with the pastries Laura had left. A small note on the tray read, "For you too, with love." That message, so simple, now seemed laden with a weight that Alicia couldn't understand, but that was beginning to feel like a dark, unsettling shadow. Determined not to dwell on it, she walked back to Daniel's studio, trying to keep her voice relaxed. "How was your day with Laura?" Alicia asked, this time more interested in any detail. "Good, as always. We just chatted about silly things, you know how she is." Alicia smiled faintly, trying to convince herself that the tension she felt was imaginary. But Daniel's eyes avoided hers, and in that instant, an inexplicable chill ran down her spine. She recalled how Laura had started visiting them more frequently since her husband began working from home. At first, she thought it was sweet to have her sister around to keep Daniel company. Now, however, something had broken in that idea, and she couldn't quite identify what. Deep down, part of her wanted to trust blindly, to hold on to the relationship she had built with so much effort and dedication. But another part, a darker one, felt that there were details that didn't quite fit. That night, Alicia couldn't sleep peacefully. In her mind, images of Daniel and Laura, laughing and sharing secrets in her own home, began to weigh more heavily than she was willing to admit. She tried to convince herself it was just a bad thought, that her sister would never do something so vile and selfish. However, a small voice, growing louder, whispered to her that perhaps she had ignored signs for too long. The next morning, before leaving for work, Alicia decided to leave a small hidden camera in the studio. It was an impulse she couldn't fully understand, but part of her knew she needed to see beyond what Daniel or Laura told her. She wasn't one to distrust easily, but this feeling was new, heavy, like a shadow that seemed to whisper that something terrible was hiding in her home. That evening, upon returning home, she felt the same uncomfortable, dark silence. She reviewed the recording, and although she couldn't see anything conclusive, every gesture and look between them took on a strange significance under her suspicion. That night, Alicia realized she was beginning to awaken a part of herself she didn't know, one that led her to distrust and seek hidden answers. In her heart, she still held onto the idea that it was all just an illusion, a misunderstanding. But each passing day, every detail she observed only deepened her feeling that something deep and dark had shattered in her life, and the worst part was that it might already be too late to fix it. Alicia couldn't shake off the feeling that had invaded her since the previous night. As the days passed, her office routine seemed to fade behind thoughts that left her bewildered. The camera she had left at home had only captured a brief conversation between Daniel and Laura, a friendly and seemingly innocent chat, but the way they looked at each other, the way they laughed together, made her feel increasingly uneasy. One night, as she reviewed the recordings again, she came across a clip that caught her attention. It was a short audio fragment of Daniel speaking softly, almost in a whisper. "So, are we meeting on Friday at the same place?" "Yes, of course, but remember Alicia arrives early that day," Laura replied with a suppressed laugh. "We only have a few hours." Alicia felt her heart pounding hard in her chest. She tried to calm herself and not jump to hasty conclusions, but suspicion was beginning to turn into a bitter certainty. How many times had they met without telling her? She recalled occasions when Daniel would mention he was going out with a friend, or when Laura said she was out with colleagues from work. All those times now seemed to connect, like pieces of a puzzle Alicia never thought she would have to solve. The following week, Alicia decided she needed clearer answers. Without saying anything, she began to observe Daniel and Laura's movements more attentively, noting each excuse, each outing without a detailed explanation. Until, on a Tuesday afternoon, she found a new recording that would dispel any trace of doubt. In the video, Daniel was talking on the phone, facing away from the camera, seemingly unaware that he was being recorded. "Yes, of course, I'll pick you up after Alicia leaves. See you at the usual cafe, don't worry, she has no idea." Alicia felt a mix of fury and sadness so intense she had to sit down to keep from collapsing to the floor. She closed her eyes, and tears fell silently, a release held back by weeks of uncertainty. The betrayal, now evident, was manifest in every word of that casual conversation Daniel held without any remorse. That night, Alicia sat with Daniel in the dining room, her breathing shaky but determined to probe a little more without revealing she already knew the truth. They dined in silence, and after a few minutes, Alicia asked the first question. "I was thinking about Laura today. You know I care about her a lot. Lately, I feel like I don't see her as much. Do you know if she's okay?" Daniel looked up, slightly puzzled, and quickly managed a smile, though a slight twitch in his jaw betrayed his discomfort. "Yeah, she's fine. I see her every now and then when she comes by the house, but I think she's busy too." Alicia held back the urge to launch a direct attack. She knew Daniel was lying, and that the lie went beyond a simple omission. But she continued with the same casual tone, concealing the rage boiling inside her. "And when you go out with your friends? Sometimes I wonder why I'm not invited. I guess I'm a little jealous, but have you ever gone out with someone else without telling me?" Daniel swallowed, the gesture almost imperceptible, but Alicia noticed. Her husband took a deep breath before responding, trying to keep his composure. "No, of course not. You know, I only go out with the guys now and then, but not much. I work too much." Alicia nodded, pretending to be satisfied with the answer. She said nothing more and let the silence fill the space between them, a silence that, for her, said it all. She no longer had any doubts. She only needed to confirm the extent to which Daniel and Laura had built this web of lies. The next day, Alicia checked Daniel's calendar and compared it to the times Laura usually had free. She noticed a pattern she had been overlooking. They always coincided on specific days, precisely when both claimed to be busy. On one occasion, Alicia even remembered suggesting to her sister that they try to meet the three of them for lunch, but Laura had declined, claiming she had a meeting. With a heavy heart, Alicia reviewed every excuse, every absence of her sister and husband, as if she were a detective in a case she never imagined she would have to solve. Amid those reviews, her mind filled with memories. Laura, with whom she shared her childhood, who had been by her side at every significant moment of her life, and Daniel, her partner, the man in whom she entrusted her dreams and fears. By the end of the week, Alicia discovered something more. Laura and Daniel often met at a restaurant far from the city center, a discreet place where Alicia never thought they would go. It was a small, rustic cafe, a routine hideout they frequented as part of a premeditated ritual of betrayal. That revelation was a devastating blow. Imagining that her husband and her sister shared an intimate space where they felt safe to speak without worrying about being discovered was a wound she couldn't assimilate. That night, Alicia put aside the cold detachment she had tried to maintain until then. The idea of confronting them both in public crossed her mind, but she didn't want to act impulsively. She had decided that if she was going to confront Daniel and Laura, she would do it with all the knowledge and strength she could gather. She wouldn't give them the luxury of playing with her emotions once more. With determination, Alicia told herself that now was not the time to give in to despair. She remembered her mother's words, "The hardest decisions are the ones that reveal who you truly are." She knew this moment would define her, and she was willing to face it her way, without allowing anyone to put her in such a humiliating and painful situation again. When Monday arrived, Alicia took a deep breath and picked up the phone. With a calm voice, she called her sister, suggesting they have lunch together that day. Laura agreed, unsuspecting of what Alicia had discovered. Alicia arrived early at the restaurant, sitting at a table in the back where she could observe without being immediately seen. Her mind worked like clockwork, reviewing every detail, every word, and every gesture of her sister that she had picked up in recent days. She was determined not to let herself be swept away by the emotion of the moment. She needed clarity, precision, and above all, the truth. When Laura arrived, her expression was carefree, as always when they met to spend time as sisters. She seemed to have no idea of what Alicia had discovered. With a friendly smile, Laura approached the table, greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, and sat across from her. "Thanks for inviting me to lunch. It's been a while since we had a sister's lunch," said Laura, settling into the chair and opening the menu. Alicia watched her in silence for a few seconds. Every small movement her sister made seemed like an unintentional provocation. It wasn't easy to contain the mix of pain and fury she felt, but she was determined not to act impulsively. "You're right, it's been a while since we did this," Alicia replied, striving to keep her voice calm. "It's been hard to see you lately. It seems like you always have something going on." Laura looked up, slightly surprised by the tone she picked up in her sister's voice. She smiled a little uncomfortably and put the menu aside. "Yes, I suppose I've been busy. You know, work, family. But it's never too much to see you." "Really, I missed you." Alicia restrained the urge to react immediately. Her sister was acting naturally, as if she had nothing to hide. But that made the situation even more painful. She wondered how many lies Laura had told her with that same innocent and honest expression, how many times she had looked her in the eyes while hiding a secret that shattered the trust between them. She decided to take a sip of water to buy herself some time, while her thoughts continued pulsing in her mind. Her gaze remained fixed on Laura. "Tell me, have you been seeing Daniel lately?" Alicia asked in a casual tone, as if it were any question. Laura blinked, her expression changed subtly, but she quickly forced a smile to cover any trace of discomfort. "Of course, I've seen him a few times." I don't know. I thought you'd be happy that we got along, that we were looking out for you, that it was like a family. That's a good thing, isn't it? Alicia nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off her. Yes, that's what I thought. And actually, I was happy that you could come over to the house so often. Until I heard something strange. Laura tensed up, her smile disappeared, and she looked at Alicia with something more than curiosity. Her discomfort was evident, though she tried to maintain her composure. Something strange? I don't know what you're talking about, Alicia. Don't you? Alicia replied in a low, almost whispering voice, keeping her eyes fixed on her sister. I'm talking about those outings with him, those lunches and coffees that you never told me about. Those days you left so quickly and didn't answer my calls. Those secluded places where no one could see you together. Laura felt the blood drain from her face. For a moment, the facade of calm and carefreeness she always maintained crumbled. The silence between them became thick, almost unbearable, as Alicia continued, each word filled with sadness and betrayal. How long, Laura? Alicia asked in a tone that combined pain and contained fury. How long have you been deceiving me? Laura looked away, bit her lower lip, and seemed to desperately search for something to say to justify her actions. However, the words she found sounded hollow, even to herself. Alicia. Hi, it's not what it seems. Daniel and we just talked. Sometimes. I needed support, someone to talk to. Her voice trembled, and the words seemed to slip from her lips without conviction. Alicia let out a small, dry, bitter laugh. Support? You think I need to hear that after everything I've discovered? I'm not stupid, Laura. And even if I were, you've given me enough reasons to understand what's going on. Laura swallowed hard, unable to find an excuse that would lighten the weight of what she had done. She knew any words would be insufficient, and that the truth, finally revealed, had broken something between them that could never be repaired. Alicia, I didn't want you to find out this way. I didn't want to hurt you, but I don't know how. I don't know why. Laura lowered her head, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. Alicia watched her, struggling to stay calm, to contain the whirlwind of emotions that invaded her. You don't know how? You don't know why? Maybe you could have explained it to me before betraying our trust, before putting our family at risk. Because that's what we are, or were. Her voice broke at the end, revealing the deep pain she had tried to hide. Laura looked up, but said nothing. The weight of her actions was evident, and her lips trembled in an attempt to find words that never came. At that moment, Alicia realized that the answers she sought, those that had tormented her for days, were not going to come. Because there was no justification that could ease the pain she felt. She had lost her husband, but she had also lost her sister, and no explanation or apology could fix that. With a mix of sadness and resignation, Alicia took a deep breath and stood up from the table. I don't need you to explain anything. What you've done, Laura, that speaks for itself. And there are no words that can fix it. Laura tried to hold her arm in a desperate attempt to stop her, to explain the inexplicable. But Alicia, with a firm gesture, pulled away. Don't touch me, she said, her voice laden with a pain that only such a betrayal could generate. Don't ever come near me again. And tell Daniel I hope both of you find some comfort in your lies. Because I can't forgive you. Without waiting for a response, Alicia walked away from the table, leaving her alone, her eyes wet and a feeling of emptiness that wouldn't fade easily. As she left the restaurant, Alicia felt how the pain slowly turned into a cold fury, a fury she knew would take time to process. But something inside her also began to change. She knew she would have to face Daniel, that there was still one more conversation, but for now, her heart needed peace. Walking down the streets, she understood that the loss and pain would not defeat her. She was stronger than she had ever imagined, and though she had lost two of the most important people in her life, she still had something invaluable, her dignity and the promise of starting anew. Alicia arrived at her mother's house with her heart still heavy and her soul shattered by betrayal. She didn't have the strength to face Daniel yet, but she felt she needed to share the pain that was suffocating her. As days passed, the weight of what she had discovered about her sister and her husband only grew, and she knew her mother would be the only one capable of understanding the depth of her suffering. However, what she didn't know was that this meeting would unleash an even darker truth. When her mother opened the door, she looked at her with concern. The sadness in Alicia's eyes was evident, and the words she had rehearsed on her way there crumbled into tears as she crossed the threshold. Her mother hugged her without asking questions, without pressing to know what had happened. "Come, sit with me, dear." "What's wrong?" her mother said, worried as she led her to the living room. Alicia collapsed onto the sofa, taking in the soft scent of her childhood home, a scent that brought back memories of happy times when her mother and sister were her refuge. But now, that same space felt oppressive, weighed down by an unknown pain. "Mom, I don't even know where to start," she said, her voice breaking as she wiped the tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is something I never thought would happen to me, especially not from them." Her mother looked at her with tenderness, gently holding her hands. "Whatever it is, dear, I'm here to listen. You don't have to hold anything back." Alicia took a deep breath, feeling an immense weight on her chest. She knew the truth would be hard, but she also knew she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. "It's Laura. She slept with Daniel. Mom," she finally managed to say, choking on her tears. Her voice broke, and she covered her face, unable to meet her mother's gaze. A silence fell over the room. Her mother seemed surprised, but the response Alicia expected, support and comfort, wasn't exactly what she received. Instead of exclaiming in horror or indignation, her mother seemed more nervous, as if trying to control her own thoughts. "Are you sure, Alicia?" her mother asked in a cautious tone, not daring to look her in the eyes. Alicia looked up, puzzled by her mother's response. She had expected her to be her confidant, her unconditional support, but her mother seemed disturbed in a strange way. "Why are you asking that?" "Of course I'm sure. I discovered everything, Mom. I saw their messages, heard their conversations." Her voice trembled as she spoke, and once again, anger and pain overwhelmed her. Her mother avoided looking at her and withdrew her hands from Alicia's. Alicia noticed how her mother avoided eye contact, and an uneasy feeling began to grow inside her. "Alicia, I think there's something you should know," her mother finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Alicia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The expression on her mother's face, which had once seemed only nervous, now looked guilty. "Something I should know? What could be worse than this, Mom?" she asked, still not fully understanding the magnitude of what she was about to hear. Her mother took a deep breath, looking out the window as if searching for a way to escape the situation. Finally, without looking her in the eyes, she spoke in a trembling voice. "Alicia, there was once, only once, a few years ago, when you and Daniel were just starting to date. He and I," her mother's voice broke, unable to say it all, but the words were enough for Alicia to understand the horror hidden behind her hesitation. Alicia felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Reality began to fragment and distort. She couldn't process it, couldn't even conceive that her mother was telling her this. "No. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you couldn't do that to me." Her voice was barely a whisper as she felt desperation and pain growing in her chest until it left her breathless. Her mother tried to reach out, extending a hand, but Alicia pushed it away brusquely. "Don't come near me," she screamed, filled with pain and fury. "How could you do this to me? First Laura, and now you." The words came out between uncontrollable sobs as she hugged herself, feeling as if her world was crumbling around her. Her mother, full of guilt, didn't know what to say. She knew there were no excuses, that no words could erase what she had done. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, Alicia. But it was so long ago, and I thought you would never know. I buried it in the past because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." She tried to justify herself, but every word seemed to fill the space with an unbearable emptiness, one Alicia could never forgive. Alicia stood up, unsteady, as if the weight of the betrayals she had just uncovered was too much to bear. "There's nothing you can say to fix this. Nothing," she murmured, unable to look at her mother, unable to endure her presence. "I can't believe I was so blind, so naive, so stupid." With teary eyes and a shattered heart, Alicia left the house without looking back. She walked the streets like a shadow of herself, feeling that the air was insufficient, that the pain in her chest was too intense, that the world she knew had turned into a nightmare. In the days that followed, Alicia sank into a deep depression. The hours passed slowly, and life, which once felt full of purpose and meaning, was now just an empty echo. She didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to see anyone. She barely ate and spent the nights awake, reliving over and over the betrayals that had broken her heart. Over time, she understood that the pain wouldn't disappear overnight, that the wounds she had suffered would take a long time to heal. But in the midst of the darkness, a small spark of hope began to shine within her, a need to rebuild herself, to find a new purpose, a new reason to move forward. She knew her life would never be the same, that the weight of the betrayals had changed her forever. But she also knew that, somehow, she would find the strength to rise and move forward, even if the path was long and lonely. The weeks following her breakup with Daniel were a whirlwind of emotions for Alicia. Although she tried little by little to regain control of her life, there were days when the pain and betrayal seemed to take over. It was in the midst of this emotional storm that one day, after noticing a delay in her cycle and some unusual symptoms, she decided to take a pregnancy test. The possibility seemed remote, but when the results appeared before her eyes, confirming that she was pregnant, Alicia felt as if her world was crumbling once again. Sitting on the edge of her bed, still holding the pregnancy test in her hand, the tears began to fall uncontrollably. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. How could this be? How is it possible that in the midst of all the pain and betrayal, this news would emerge, changing everything? In the first days, Alicia felt trapped at a crossroads. Sadness engulfed her every time she thought about the possibility of having a child by a man who had betrayed her so deeply. In her sleepless nights, she wondered if she would ever be able to look at the child without remembering all the pain she had endured, if she could look at them without thinking about the web of lies in which Daniel and her own family had ensnared her. One afternoon, when the weight of the decision had become unbearable, Clara, her steadfast friend, came to visit. As always, Clara sensed the emotional burden Alicia was carrying and, without asking questions, simply hugged her, giving her the warmth and support she so desperately needed. "Alicia, are you okay? It seems like there's something more, something different that you haven't told me lately," said Clara with a mixture of tenderness and concern. Alicia felt she could no longer keep this secret. With a trembling voice, she confessed, "Clara, I'm pregnant, and I don't know what to do. I don't want this child to be a reminder of what Daniel did to me, of all the pain I've had to endure." Clara listened attentively, without interrupting, allowing Alicia to pour out her heart. After a few moments of silence, Clara took her hand and spoke softly. "Alicia, I understand your fear, but this child is not an extension of Daniel or of the betrayal you went through. This baby is part of you, part of that genuine love you once had. You have the chance to give them a life full of love and hope. Don't focus on what happened. Think about what you can create from here." Clara's words resonated in Alicia's heart, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of light in the midst of the darkness. She remembered the days when she had sincerely loved Daniel, the happy moments they had shared, and she understood that her baby was a result of that love, not the betrayal that came afterward. The baby growing inside her was blameless. They were innocent and deserved a life full of love and care. That night, Alicia stayed awake late, thinking about her child, about the possibility of giving them a different life, providing a safe home filled with values and lessons to teach them strength and honesty. For the first time, she felt a spark of joy thinking about the future, and it was in that moment that she decided she would keep her child. From that moment on, her life would no longer be hers alone. She would have a far greater reason to fight, a reason she could not afford to abandon. The months that followed were a process of reconciliation with herself. Alicia understood that the arrival of her child was an opportunity to start over, to rebuild her life from self-love and the strength she had learned to cultivate amid the trials. She began to prepare the baby's room with care, choosing each detail with the hope of welcoming them into a space filled with peace and love. Each purchase, each small item added to the room gradually brought her joy. One day, while looking at the little toys and baby clothes she had bought, Alicia felt at peace. She knew that her life had changed irrevocably, but she had also found in her child a reason to move forward, a reason to fight. The betrayal by Daniel and her family was part of her past, a painful story that would remain behind, but her baby would be her future, a promise of hope and happiness. In time, Alicia understood that everything she had lived through did not define her as a victim, but as a woman who, though wounded, had risen up and found in her own strength the power to rebuild herself. Alicia's pregnancy was progressing slowly, and with it, her strength. Although the first few months had been emotionally challenging, with moments of uncertainty and fear for the future, her connection with the baby growing inside her deepened with each passing day. Every heartbeat of her child on the ultrasound, every tiny movement she started to feel, were like invisible threads weaving her determination and partially healing the wounds of the past. One afternoon, Alicia was in a baby store, choosing the crib she had been searching for over the past weeks. She had spent a long time comparing models, wanting the best for her child, no matter the cost. While reviewing her options, she heard a voice that painfully familiar. Alicia. She turned and saw Laura, her sister, standing a few meters away with a surprised and guilty expression. Alicia felt a surge of emotions overwhelming her, from resentment to an old sadness she thought she had overcome. She tried to remain firm and calm, though the memory of the betrayal felt like a still sensitive wound. "Laura," she replied coldly, without any sign of affection. Laura lowered her gaze, uncomfortable, but stepped cautiously toward her, as if each step was a test of courage. "I heard you're expecting a baby." I just wanted to say that, despite everything that happened. "I'm happy for you, Alicia." "And I'm sorry," Laura's voice broke and she could barely finish her sentence. "I'm sorry for causing you so much pain." Alicia remained silent, uncertain whether she was capable of forgiving or even listening to Laura's apology. She had spent months processing the pain, the abandonment, and the betrayal of those she loved most. Now, the woman in front of her, her sister, seemed so small, so ashamed, and perhaps so regretful. But Alicia was no longer the person she had been when she trusted her blindly. "It's too late for apologies, Laura," Alicia finally said, her voice serene but firm. "There was a time when I would have given anything for you, when my love for you was unconditional. But you yourself broke that. I don't hate you. There's simply nothing between us anymore." Laura nodded slowly, accepting the pain of those words. She knew she deserved them, that what she had done could not be erased with a simple apology. Yet, a part of her still needed to try. "Alicia, I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I regret every second of what I did. I lost the best sister, my best friend," Laura said, and her eyes filled with tears. Alicia looked at her for a few seconds, and for the first time, instead of feeling angry or hurt, she felt a deep compassion for her sister. Laura was paying the price for her decisions, and though they would never be the close sisters they once were, Alicia realized that holding onto resentment would only weigh her down with an unnecessary burden. "I hope you find peace someday, Laura. But I have to live for my child and for myself. I don't want this story to be a bitter memory that marks him. I need to start over, and that means letting go of the pain, even the pain you caused me." Laura nodded, grateful for Alicia's words, though she knew the damage was done. With a look of regret and a silent goodbye, she turned and walked away, leaving Alicia with the certainty that she had closed an important chapter in her life. As she left the store, Alicia felt an unexpected lightness, a sensation of freedom she hadn't experienced in months. She decided to take a walk in the nearby park, where families and children played. The sounds of children's laughter made her smile, and a gentle breeze caressed her face. In that moment, Alicia felt an inner peace that helped her understand that her life was taking a new direction, one she had chosen with wisdom and self-love. That night, as she settled into bed, Alicia placed her hand on her belly, feeling her baby's faint movements. She was surprised to speak out loud, as if addressing her child directly, something she had never done before. "Little one, you don't know how much I already love you. There are many things ahead of us, and though we've gone through hard times, you are my miracle, my new hope. I promise to give you all the goodness I can. I promise I will never hurt you, and that I will always be here for you." That moment was one of the most meaningful for Alicia. She had fully embraced her new life, her role as a mother, and the power of healing. The betrayal would remain in the past, and in her heart, a new love was beginning to bloom, a pure and eternal love that gave her the strength to build a different future. The next day, Alicia began making some changes. With the help of her friend Clara, she started planning a small business she could run from home once her baby was born. It was a simple project, but it restored her excitement for creating something of her own. Every decision, every step, brought her closer to the version of herself she had always wanted to be, a free, brave woman, capable of rising above everything. As the months passed, Alicia's life filled with small and big victories, each one a testament to her resilience. The betrayal of Daniel and Laura remained there, a chapter in her story, but now it was only a part of a past that didn't define her. What truly mattered was the future, the path she was building alongside her child, a life filled with love and peace. The day she finally gave birth, Alicia felt her life being reborn with her child. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she understood that despite all the pain she had endured, this new love surpassed it all. She had not gone through that storm in vain. She had grown, she had learned, and she had become stronger in ways she had never imagined. Alicia looked at her baby and whispered, "It's you and me, little one. And together, we're going to be happy." Months later, Alicia watched her little son sleep peacefully in his crib. A sense of absolute peace filled the room, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely calm. Observing the gentle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, she realized that everything she had gone through had led her to this moment. Her life had changed drastically since that betrayal, but at the same time, it had been transformed in a beautiful and unexpected way. It had been a few years since she decided to start over. Alicia found in motherhood a version of herself she didn't know, strong, resilient, and filled with love. Over time, she learned to forgive, not so much for those who hurt her, but for herself and for the life she wanted to build for her son. She understood that forgiving did not mean accepting or justifying, but rather freeing her heart from an unnecessary weight. One afternoon, while she was walking with her son in the park, she ran into Clara, her loyal friend and companion in the darkest moments. Seeing her so radiant and serene, Clara couldn't help but smile. "Alicia, I've never seen you so at peace." "It's amazing to see how far you've come," Clara said, giving her a warm hug. Alicia smiled, feeling that those words exactly reflected her feelings. "You know, Clara, it took me time to understand, but I believe that all experiences, even the hardest ones, have something to teach us. I learned to love myself and to trust myself, something I had always put in the hands of others. Now I know that my worth does not depend on anyone else. And although it was difficult, I thank God for everything He taught me." Clara looked at her with admiration. "You're an inspiration, Alicia. Sometimes I think that when life takes something from us, it's because it wants to give us something better. And look, it gave you this little miracle," she said, looking at Alicia's son, who was playing in the sand with other children. Alicia nodded, feeling deep gratitude in her heart. She looked at her son and understood that all the pain had been worth it, that the peace and happiness she now felt were the result of her struggle and strength. That night, after her son fell asleep, Alicia sat in the living room, surrounded by silence, and reflected on the path she had traveled. She remembered each stage, the pain of betrayal, the sadness and loneliness, the long sleepless nights, the fear of not being enough. However, she also remembered how each obstacle had been a lesson, how she had learned to walk alone, to rely on her own worth, and, above all, to see in her son a reason to live with joy and hope. As she remembered, she felt warmth in her chest, warmth that was gratitude, self-love, and confidence in the future. She had managed to heal her heart, had learned to live for herself, and now she had a full life to share with her son. Years later, when her son grew up and could understand her story, Alicia told him not only the difficult moments, but also everything she had learned about self-love and resilience. She taught him to be strong, to never let anyone define his worth, and to always seek peace in his own heart, no matter how complicated life seemed. And every time she remembered those moments, she did so with serenity, knowing that the past was not a burden, but the foundation of the life she had built. Alicia found in her son the hope and strength she needed to move forward, and in the process, she discovered her true power. She knew that, although her life had had difficult moments, she had managed to write an ending full of peace, love, and hope. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to leave in the comments what you felt as you listened to it, and if you have gone through a similar situation of betrayal, I would love to hear your valuable opinion. I would be honored if you left a like, shared the video with a friend or family member, and subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next surprising story that is appearing on your screen right now. We have guaranteed entertainment exclusively for you. See you in the next video.